Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a genuinely profound piece of writing titled And the Waters Remembered. When we think about major climate disasters, specifically floods, our minds almost automatically jump straight to the statistics, right? We picture hectares of land completely submerged. We calculate the massive monetary value of lost infrastructure, and we just kind of get numb to those staggering numbers flashing across the news. But today, we're going to completely flip that script. We're stepping past the hard data to confront the deep, emotional, and intensely human cost of these events. We'll be exploring this through a totally unique lens, looking at the intimate, everyday stories left behind in the wake of rising waters. The text actually opens by doing something totally unexpected. It gives a voice directly to the water itself. It reads, "They call me the Indus, but I have worn many names, Sindhu, Miran, and Darya, and each whispered by a different century." I mean, what an incredibly powerful framing device. The river isn't just painted as some mindless, destructive force of nature. Instead, it's characterized as an ancient, silent observer. It's literally watched empires rise and fall. It's listened to the prayers of kings and the laughter of brides. It's the ultimate witness to human history, setting the stage for us to understand these disasters not as random acts of violence, but as deeply intertwined pieces of the human experience.
Section 1. The River That Remembers. The Archive of Water.
And this brings us to the absolute core thesis of what we're looking at today. The river explicitly states, "I do not destroy, I remember." When the waters rise, the argument goes, they aren't just wiping things out, they're gathering them. The river literally becomes the ultimate archivist of human tragedy. It claims that when it touches the doorsteps of villages and sweeps through streets, it's actually collecting the stories of the drowned, the displaced, and the silenced. These are people whose lives might otherwise be entirely erased from our maps and our history books. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this grand, abstract idea of the river's memory gets anchored into very tangible, everyday artifacts. The river's archive isn't made of paper, right? It's made of ashes, the echo of bridal laughter, fish bones, and the quiet secrets of the displaced. It holds on to a wooden toy, a torn prayer mat, a bridal veil heavy with dust. By focusing on these ultra-specific objects, we instantly grasp the sheer intimacy of what's been lost. We aren't just talking about houses washing away. We're talking about the daily, beautiful fabric of everyday life. Moving right along into Section 2, the suddenness of loss, when time runs out. We can clearly see this sudden, terrifying escalation through the story of a young boy named Rayhan. Just take a look at this timeline. At dusk, everything is totally normal. Rayhan is playfully leading his family's buffaloes home through the shallow riverbed. The village is actually praying for rain after a long drought. But then, by midnight, the rain arrives, but definitely not as a mercy. It's a massive deluge. The village basically just becomes water. Mud walls literally melt away. Rayhan bravely wades into the dark, freezing floodwaters just to save Soni, their youngest calf, cutting her loose. But tragically, by dawn, rescuers only find the calf standing alone on a mound. Rayhan's body is found caught downstream. In literally just a matter of hours, a lifetime of toil and a young, vibrant life are completely swallowed up. And we see that exact same terrifying speed over in Thari Mohala. A father, Nasser, and his daughter Aisha tried to escape a flash flood in their small car. Nasser thought they'd be fine, but the water climbed past the tires and up the windscreen with a speed literally no one could have anticipated. The car stalled out and was just swept away. The only physical anchor left of that little girl's dreams? A pink school bag covered in cartoon rabbits, found days later wedged against a tree. Inside there was a photograph of her school assembly where she had stood first in class, but it was completely blurred, the ink running like tears. It is just a devastating reminder of how fast the mundane turns into unthinkable tragedy. Which brings us to Section 3, Voices in the Water, Silenced Connections. Consider the story of Haji Karim during the brutal Kabul river floods. As the waters roared around his home, he scrambled up to his roof, desperately clutching this old radio, frantically tuning the dial through the static. He was desperately listening for any news of his 5 brothers stranded near Keshki, but the broadcast just moved on to mundane road closures, and the truth of his brother's fate drowned in the frequencies. When rescuers found Karim 2 days later, he had passed away with that radio still pressed tightly to his chest, its antenna bent like a question mark. It's a haunting, heartbreaking image of a man seeking connection in a world that had suddenly gone totally silent. There's also this persistent rumor that's spread through the relief camps, a story of a woman on her way to work in Skardu swallowed by a flash flood, found days later with her office IDs still perfectly around her neck. And it begs this incredibly strategic question. If the road forgot her, will the water remember? This seamlessly bridges these isolated individual tragedies right back to our broader theme. You see, society moves on quickly, right? The roads are cleared, the news cycle inevitably shifts to the next thing. But the river holds on to our story.
And we really see this deep, innate human need to record and remember in 12-year-old Zara. While living in a relief camp, she somehow became a chronicler of this fragile, displaced humanity. She wrote her daily observations on scraps of packaging, literally donated biscuit wrappers, and hid them away in an empty flour sack. She used to whisper to them, "If I forget, you remember." Tragically, Zara ended up succumbing to disease right there in the camp. When volunteers finally found her sack much later, the words had blurred, but the lines still faintly shimmered on the wrappers. She tried so hard to archive her world, exactly like the river archives its victims.
Section 4. The reality of relief. The logistics of aid. Let's move to and see how this builds into the aftermath phase of these events.
So, in the aftermaths, we're often presented with a deeply frustrating dichotomy. On one side, we see this massive wave of national generosity. Everyday people donating their gold bangles, office workers gathering sacks of rice, school children emptying their piggy banks and sending in their coins. The whole country becomes this beautiful patchwork of kindness. But then, on the ground, we see a harsh, very different reality. Immense logistical red tape actively blocking that aid. While children in the camps were literally chewing on dry roadies, relief trucks were sitting idle miles away, just waiting on signatures and official permissions. Empty tents stood unused in one district, while the actual supplies were completely diverted elsewhere. And this brilliantly illustrates the painfully fleeting nature of relief. As the text so poetically notes, somewhere between the donors and the drowned, something dissolved like salt. I mean, wow. It points out that human compassion, much like the floodwaters themselves, can rise incredibly fast, overflow with massive power, and then just dry right back into dust. The news anchors read off these beautiful, neat donation figures, but the reality on the ground for the displaced is just endless waiting for help that was promised, but somehow, somewhere lost its way. Finally, Section 5, What the Water Keeps. Enduring Remnants.
Here we find the story of Saba and Irfan in Kotmifan. Their wedding was completely washed away the exact night before it was supposed to happen. The entire village just became a sheet of moving brown water. Days later, Saba's red bridal lenga was found clinging to a tree branch, just shimmering with silt. But there is a quiet, powerful marker of resilience here, too. Months later, as Irfan was helping rebuild Saba's home, he deliberately planted a tiny sapling right near where their bridal stage had been. A living, breathing memory. And it's noted that every single monsoon after that, that specific sapling flowered first.
You really start to realize how the river weaves all these seemingly isolated stories together. Down in the half-submerged village of Hajm Golf, local children were making little toy boats out of plastic bottles. When the current eventually carried those toys away, one of them snagged on a branch near the highway, and heartbreakingly, that branch was right above a sunken car where, weeks earlier, rescuers had found a man and his little girl holding hands. This connects directly back to Nasir and Aisha from earlier. The river's path is continuous. It tragically yet poetically links the absolute innocence of children playing with the devastating reality of a family lost.
So the crucial point is this visual archive we've built up today. The pink school bag with cartoon rabbits, a heavy red bridal lenga coated in silt, a broken radio clutched tightly to a chest, a buffalo bell ringing in a survivor's memory, blurred writings on a biscuit wrapper, plastic boats drifting over a sunken car. Look, these aren't just random items. They represent the exact human cost of the disaster. They are the lives lived, the dreams held, and the futures permanently disrupted. The river remembers absolutely everything. We're ultimately left with a stark warning. The monsoon will absolutely come again. The waters will rise, not in anger, but in remembrance. And it leaves us with this final, crucial thought to deeply reflect on. When the waters inevitably rise again, will we remember the intimate human stories they left behind, or will we just go right back to counting the statistics? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll catch you next time.